Lobbying Bureau is here? Okay, thank you. Good evening. Good to see you all, and thank you for just really being extremely cooperative as we move through this process. You know, these are challenging topics during these times, and many of you have been really just great as we try to, just navigate the complexities of them. So I thank you very much, and it has not gone unnoticed, and I appreciate it. Welcome to tonight's Borough Board meeting. We have 4 items on the agenda. One is a presentation by New York City Clerk Lobbying Bureau on Lobbying Disclosure Amnesty Program. The second is a resolution on Department of City Planning's proposed mandatory inclusionary housing zoning text amendment. The third is resolution on Department of City Planning's proposed zoning for quality and affordability zoning text amendment. And the fourth is discussion and vote on resolution for right to counsel legislation. I would like to first have the minutes of the October 2015 Borough Board meeting adopted. You want to call the roll? Okay.
We'll take a quick roll call. Community Board 1, Community Board 2, Community Board 3,
Yes.
Community Board 4, Community Board 5,
Here.
Community Board 6,
Aye.
Community Board 7, Community Board 8, Community Board 9,
Present.
Community Board 10,
Present.
Community Board 11,
Here.
Community Board 12, Community Board 13, Community Board 14,
Here.
Community Board 15,
Here.
Community Board 16,
Here.
Community Board 17,
Here.
Community Board 18. Councilmember Barron,
Present.
Councilmember Cornegie,
Present.
Councilmember Cumbo's office, Councilmember Deutsch's office, Councilmember Espinal's office, Councilmember Eugene's office, Councilmember Gentili's office, Councilmember Greenfield's office, Councilmember Lander's office, Councilmember Levin's office, Councilmember Mizell's office, Councilmember Mealy's office, Councilmember Menchaca,
Here.
Councilmember Reynoso, Councilmember Traeger, Councilmember Williams. You have a quorum.
Thank you. Again, we would like to adopt the minutes of the October 2015 Borough Board meeting. The November minutes will be adopted at the January meeting. And copies of the minutes were sent to all members. Are there any corrections?
I'll submit it.
Talking to the mic, please.
I'll give it to Andrew later.
Okay, great. Is there a motion to adopt the minutes from our October Borough Board meeting?
I'll make the motion to adopt.
Second? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Great. Tonight's first agenda item is a presentation by the New York City Clerk Lobbying Bureau on Lobbying Disclosure Amnesty Program, beginning in January. I believe we have Michael. Give me your last name, Michael. Okay, Ms. Sweeney. My glasses. Ms. Sweeney, New York City Clerk, will present and then take questions from the Borough Board. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Mr. Borough President, and thank you, everybody, for giving us the opportunity. My name is Michael McSweeney. I am the City Clerk, and the Office of the City Clerk also is the home of the New York City Lobbying Bureau. And we are very happy to offer, to announce that we are offering an amnesty period for any party that may be required to register as a lobbyist for the purpose of the city's lobbying law. And we're not quite sure how big that universe is, so this is a kind of an exercise to increase transparency by bringing more people into filing as lobbyists. And this is something that is starting in January. It'll start on January 1st and end on June 30th, so it's a one-time, 6-month program for people who interact with city government to maybe ask themselves, if they're not registered as a lobbyist, whether or not they should be registered as a lobbyist. So I happen to also be a former member of Community Board 2 in Queens. I served on my community board for 8 years, and I'm very well aware of how important the community board is as a center of activity for not-for-profit organizations, for people who interact with their elected officials, for elected officials, and I think it's probably one of the most effective ways to reach out to the universe of people we're seeking to offer this opportunity to. That being mainly not-for-profit organizations and other actors who are very involved in their local communities, who are known at the community boards. So that's why we are here to just make this announcement. So I would just like to introduce my staff who is assisting me today to make this announcement. My deputy my deputy city clerk, Damaris Acosta, who is very known to many people here. My general counsel, Patrick Sinmoy, who is one of the experts in lobbying in New York City and probably New York State, and our director of training, Jessica Fiorillo. And Jessica will be reaching out to each community board offices, and we're looking to set up any opportunities that we can to do outreach about this amnesty opportunity. Okay, so the amnesty opportunity, like I said, it's a 6-month program. It's a one-time opportunity for somebody who may be required to register as a lobbyist under the lobbying law. And we're going to distribute this pamphlet that kind of distills the lobbying law down into basically 3 areas that you need to ask yourself. We have, there's like a 3-step process for anyone who needs to ask whether or not my interaction with city government officials qualifies as lobbying activity under the law. So we ask to ask yourself, does my activity fall under the 11 types of activity stated by the lobbying law? Is my activity covered by the 11 exceptions to lobbying stated into the lobbying law? And the third is the reporting threshold. Does my organization earn, incur, or expend over $5,000 a year of combined compensation and expenses? And if you meet those 3 things, you may be required to register as a lobbyist in New York City. So that's what I am here for, and I'd like to ask all of the board chairs to go back to your community boards, to go back to your district managers and let them know to please, if you could pass the word to everybody that comes in contact with the community board that there is an amnesty opportunity, and it will begin in January and end in June, and it's very simple. It doesn't cost anything. It is free of charge to register to file for amnesty, and it is not a complicated process. So we would like to visit all the community boards, let everybody know that this is happening, to do some outreach, and to give everybody an opportunity to ask us questions and to see whether or not this is something they should be taking advantage of. So that's it. If anyone has any questions, we'd be happy to answer. Yes?
It appears that any organization applying for discretionary funding that has staff that's being compensated, more than $5,000. Can you explain the interaction between the lobbying activities and the reporting threshold? Because it just doesn't seem like every group that applies for discretionary funding should have to register as a lobbyist.
Right. That's a great question. So basically, the lobbying activity in many cases for an organization getting a discretionary funding is, if you are actually asking an elected official to help you to obtain discretionary funding. Not every organization is actually, making the request. In some cases, the request isn't made directly by a staff member of the organization. But what we have is a formula in one of our advisory opinions that it basically, an organization can look at its budget, look at how much money is being spent in salary, and look at how much time is actually being made in the lobbying activity. So it could be as simple as you're spending 5 minutes asking a legislator to help support your request for funding. It may be much more than that. So there's something on our website, there's an advisory opinion that I think we have the formula, right?
Yeah, basically what you need to do is look at each of your employees. You have to look at the allocable amount of time that they spend on lobbying. And when you add that all up, plus all the expenses you have, if in the end you've incurred over $5,000 in any given year, then you're obligated to register. One of the reasons why we're doing the amnesty is that we noticed a lot of not-for-profits are actually lobbying, but they're not even aware of it. In fact, one of the things the City Council started doing is there's at the end of every year, you have to sign a form, and we get lots of calls from people about it, saying that they have complied with lobbying law. Well, this is what you're supposed to do. So this is the opportunity for all the not-for-profits to come in from the code. So in effect, there won't be fines. One of the things that have scared a lot of people from coming in is you can be fined. And that you should also bear in mind that anyone who files lobbying here in the city of New York is obligated to file with the state. So we've also talked with the state, and concurrently with us, they're also doing an amnesty. So no one, this is a golden opportunity for everyone to come in and so avoid all the penalties. That's the whole point of it.
Thank you, Patrick. So essentially, we're going to direct you to look at the formula that we have to see whether or not you go over that $5,000 threshold. And just to let you know, the amnesty period was authorized by local law 129 of 2013. And one of the things that law did was it increased the reporting threshold. It used to be $2,000 in 1 year, now it's $5,000. And one of the reasons for doing that was to take out the smaller not-for-profit organizations that might be triggering the lobbying law in a $2,000 threshold. So by increasing it to $5,000, you really have taken a lot of the not-for-profits out of being required to file as lobbyists. So that's one of the things. And that's one of the things that's great about this opportunity is, we want to get out there and, let people know that you should be asking yourself whether or not my not-for-profit organization is required to file under the law. I think a lot of the small organizations are going to find that they are not required. But this one-time opportunity gives everybody a chance to look at it. And if they should have filed in the past, they'll be able to come in without being hit with late fees. And this will be my last point. There's no illegal lobbying. Lobbying is speech that's protected by the Constitution. Local governments can regulate the reporting of lobbying activity. So the teeth that the lobbying law has is a daily late fee of $25 per day if you haven't filed a lobbying report. So the amnesty program helps you to come in without having to face the prospect of being hit by late fees, which when added over a long period of time can be quite expensive for an organization.
Any other questions?
Okay, Mr. Borough President, thank you so much.
Only question I have is why would you live in Queens when you could live in Brooklyn?
I was told that I'm not hip enough, so I'm working on it.
Carlos Machaca will give you lessons. Some new council members and representatives walked in after we did the roll, so can you just announce yourself? Alan, I know Councilman Mizell.
Should I make a speech?
No, just say here. Who else? Anyone else?
I think Councilmember Reynoso's office also is after this.
Reynoso's office, we didn't get you, okay. I love Jumani. Okay, so tonight's second agenda item is a resolution seeking modification to the mandatory inclusionary housing zoning text amendment proposed by the Department of City Planning in consultation with the Department of Housing, Preservation, and Development. This text amendment is a key component in Mayor de Blasio's Housing New York plan to create or preserve 200,000 affordable housing units. Utilizing the mandatory inclusionary housing program for the first time, New York City would mandate the inclusion and permanence of affordable housing in residential developments over 10 units. Built within the individual rezone areas, the requirement would operate together with city housing subsidies other zoning changes, and 421A reforms achieved in Albany in 2015, June of 2015. You may recall that City Planning presented this proposal to the Borough Board on October 6th, and that a public hearing was held on November 4th. Frank Ricala, Deputy Director of Zoning Division from the Department of City Planning, is here tonight and will be available to take questions from the Borough Board members. Mr. Ricala, is he here yet? Yes. Can you come up to the podium? You can't sit back there. You can come. You come sit next to me, okay? How you doing? Good. So at this time, I'd like to open the floor for questions and comments from members of the Borough Board and or their representatives. So if there's any questions at this time, please, this is an opportunity to do so.
I have a question from Commissioner Woodson. These proposals that are before us, the language according to modifications, is that if City Hall says and adopted these modifications, then our vote to disapprove would then become an approval? You know what I'm saying? Are these like proposals that if City Hall accepted them, then it would be our approval of the mandatory inclusionary housing with these changes?
It's a pathway that, because the motion would be to disapprove with conditions, right? So if the City Planning Commission take the in-scope changes and they are able to vote them in, when this gets to the City Council, then the City Council would see, obviously, advancement of the proposal, and so it may put more council members in position to actually ultimately approve the proposal. And then there are items that are not in scope, and it would require a commitment from the administration to do follow-up changes, whether it be an additional zoning text change or related actions that might advance the items.
And this vote does not become an approval if they accept our recommendations. Our proposal is a non-binding advisory proposal that we hope City Planning takes with great consideration. So this is an opportunity for the Borough Board to put its position on the record with City Planning and the administration. So once the vote is taken, it would be a disapproval if it passes, and that would stay in the records of the Borough Board as being disproved with the following recommendations and modifications made. It wouldn't automatically change.
Councilman Barron?
Yes, and along that same line, would it be limited to what's stated here, or would there be an opportunity to perhaps include other modifications that we might want to see?
So there's multiple processes. So clearly, when this gets to the City Council, that whatever the commission would act on, which may include some of the changes from this, when it gets to the council is totally at liberty to make changes. If the if the commission were to say take something here and shrink it, the council can't open it back up again. So that's one thing that could happen. And then there are certain modifications that could be offered tonight to fine-tune this.
So the commission then would have the final say as to what would be?
No, the council has final say, but for example, if the commission shrinks something,
Yes.
you can't open it up. But the council could shrink it further, for example, in its action. If the
So the
commission-
council could not, in fact, expand something that the commission had said it wanted to compress?
However, the council could seek a follow-up action that they would get a commitment from the administration to come back and clean this up to match the council's interest. So it might take like another year before we could get it more perfect.
Thank you.
I just want to be clear. So if I have conditions that I think are not ready to be submitted tonight, depending on how the vote goes, do I have opportunity to vote it so that it's part of Brooklyn's voice, or this is Brooklyn's voice now?
It would be the Borough Board vote now, but clearly, again, when this advances to the council, all the additional information you're going to learn from tonight on will certainly be available for you to fine-tune what you'd like to deliver at the council.
But my conditions that I want to put would not be able to be attached to Brooklyn's official voice.
We would have to come back to the Borough Board to ask for a further modification.
I see.
Now, mind you, in the sequence, City Planning will have a hearing soon, so if we could give them additional information prior to their vote, it's of value. If it happens after the commission's vote, then it's advisement to the full City Council delegation.
And if, as Richard just stated, if there's something you want to bring back to the Borough Board, I'm more than willing to do that.
Thank you.
Okay? We will now discuss the Borough Board's resolution seeking modification pertaining to affordable requirements, location, modification to the mandatory requirements through the Board of Standards and Appeals, payment in lieu of applicability, family-sized units, and a follow-up action for affordable housing opportunities for previously upzoned areas that would require subsequent action by the Department of City Planning. The draft resolution was previously distributed to members of the Borough Board and highlights why the Borough Board seeks modification. If there are any questions, Richard will answer them at this time.
Point of information.
Yes.
Are we still talking about the MIH or
Correct.
ZQA?
MIH.
Okay. Still talking.
So MIH is the 3-page proposal you have in front of you? 3.5. And ZQA is the 12-page. So we'll get the 3-page one.
So we're still just in the discussion phase?
Yes.
Okay.
If there's any questions that you have to Richard, my staffer, you can do so at this time. I'm sorry? Yes.
Richard, just for clarity, in essence, however we vote tonight, the city council still has the final say, correct?
Absolutely correct.
Thank you.
Any members of the board have any final comments, questions, or proposed modification to the draft resolution? No? Okay, so thank you, Mr. Ricala, for being available for the Borough Board tonight. So we're moving forward with modification, the proposed mandatory inclusionary housing zone text amendment. Richard, can you read the motion?
Okay, so we're just going to streamline. Again, this would be a recommendation. A yes vote would be a rejection of the city's proposal according to modifications to the mandatory inclusionary housing text amendment. And again, it's along the line of the themes of these changes. Again, affecting the affordability requirements, location, modifications to the mandatory requirements that would be affected by the Board of Standards and Appeals, payment of lieu applicability for family-sized units, and then this follow-up action that would allow opportunities to revisit previously upzoned areas that would allow the Department of City Planning to create affordable housing opportunities.
So the motion is to approve with your modifications.
But it would be a no vote.
Disapprove.
So voting yes of a disapproval for the modifications.
The motion is to disapprove with the modifications detailed in the, instead of reading the 3 pages, 3.5 pages, it's to disapprove City Planning's proposal with those attached modifications submitted with disapproval. Does that make sense?
Andrew, whose modifications are they?
These modifications were drafted by the Borough President's Office in consultation with all the community boards throughout their individual review process, as well as council members' offices.
All right, so if we vote yes, we're voting no?
Yes, right. So what we did was, because this was a citywide effort, we reached out to each borough board and said, what would you have liked to have seen in it based on your community? And so by voting with our recommendations today, we're saying no to the city plan, and here are the recommendations that we are making based on each one of the various community boards.
Sounds reasonable.
Right, so your yes vote is saying that you like your borough president and that you are voting with your borough president.
Well, now I'm going to vote yes twice.
Okay? Can I get a second to the motion? Second? All members of the Borough Boards are eligible to vote on this matter. Andrew, please call the roll.
Community Board 1, Community Board 2, Community Board 3, Community Board 4, Community Board 5. Yes, no?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Community Board 6,
Over here.
Community Board 7,
Yes.
Community Board 8,
We have voted in favor.
Community Board 9, Community Board 10,
Yes, but I'd like to say for the record that our board had other criticisms and concerns about the proposal, and we hope that the city council will address them and not just look at this resolution tonight.
absolutely. Community Board 11,
Abstain.
Community Board 12, Community Board 13, Community Board 14,
Yes.
Community Board 15,
No.
Community Board 16. Yes. Community Board 17? Yes. Community Board 18? Community Board 18?
Yes.
Councilmember Barron?
Yes, and I'm pleased to know that there will be other opportunities to add to what's already listed as modifications.
Councilmember Cornegie's office?
Abstain?
Councilmember Cumbo's office?
Yes.
Councilmember Deutsch's office? Councilmember Espinal's office? Councilmember Eugene's office? Councilmember Gentili's office? Councilmember Greenfield's office? Councilmember Lander's office? Councilmember Levin's office? Abstain. Councilmember Mizell?
Alan,
Councilmember
yes.
Alan?
Richard,
I'm
you-
voting yes. As long as yes means no.
Councilmember Mealy's office? Councilmember Menchaca?
Yes.
Councilmember Reynoso?
Yes.
Councilmember Traeger?
Yes.
Councilmember Williams?
I'm pleased to, three of my major, biggest community boards have voted down the mayor's proposal, so I'm happy to join them in voting yes. And so as I want to join with Councilman Barron and say I'm pleased that there'll be additional time to put in some additional things that need to be changed. I definitely have some, and hopefully the mayor will, who has been good in moving forward this conversation, but will listen to some of the changes that need to happen before it comes before the council.
It's a nice shirt.
Thank you, brother.
President Adams?
Yes.
Okay. The vote is 20 in favor, 1 against, 2 abstentions. 3 abstentions. It passes.
Thank you very much. That concludes our business related to the mandatory inclusionary housing zoning text amendment. The next agenda item is a resolution seeking modification to the proposed zoning for quality and affordability zoning text amendment by the Department of City Planning. The zoning for quality and affordable text amendment aims to address zoning regulations that are outdated and often impede and discourage the production of better quality residential buildings and the creation of a wider range of new affordable housing. This proposal is tailored to address issues specific to different neighborhood texts. You may recall again that City Planning presented this proposal to the Borough Board on October 6th, and that a public hearing was held on November 4th. Frank Rocala, Deputy Director of Zoning Division from the Department of City Planning, is here tonight and will be available to take questions from the Borough Board members. And again, welcome for being here. At this time, I'd like to open the floor for questions and comments from any members of the Borough Board or their representatives. Any questions?
Oh, I have an amendment. Is this the appropriate? I would like to amend. Apologies.
So, Ethan, we're going to take the amendments after the motion is made before we vote on it.
Any other questions?
This is just questions on the proposal or the modifications.
Yep. So Community Board 7 voted, not surprisingly, voted down the ZQA proposal. I think our main concern, especially as it relates to Sunset Park, was that
though the carrots that were offered for good design and sort of good architecture in context with the neighborhood was commendable, there weren't any sticks. And we thought to dissuade developers and architects without scruples to just look at the envelope changes in the zoning and not look at the quality within the proposal. So I was wondering if there was any sort of discussion during the creation of this plan to put some sticks so that developers wouldn't just see the envelope, which they often see when changes to zoning are made. They only see the envelope change, not the things that were talked about at the presentation, which are the bay windows and the raised the raised floors, which I said are commendable, but not necessarily mandatory in the zoning proposal. So if you want to sort of...
I guess what I would say, so hi everyone. What I would say is that I think one of the things that we heard as we've kind of talked about this proposal over the last couple months is a concern like this, that we would be giving additional flexibility, but there was nothing that was guaranteeing that would be used for the things that we said it would be, what we were trying to do, right? Make for particularly good, better ground floors for like retail spaces or in residential buildings. So I think what we tried to do, and as part of the proposal, was to only allow that additional height if you do those things. So it's not so much, it's a carrot, but we didn't think there was a need for a stick because you didn't have the opportunity to do those things unless you did that thing, right? So you didn't particularly, because I think one of the concerns we heard the most about was height, that height was only coming if you, could only be used on the ground floor, for example. You couldn't build it somewhere up in a kind of higher penthouse floor or something like that. So we've tried to, as we've developed the proposal, hear those concerns so that people, you know, our goals are, we share the same goals. We want to make for better buildings, and we want to make sure that people have rules that can allow them, but don't allow something else.
Thank you. I appreciate, I don't want to speak out loud, I appreciate the time, but I was wondering, you thought like a developer, because they're thinking 2 steps ahead of us. You know, they're thinking, they're like, okay, yeah, great, and then they'll go and do something else that we didn't even think about until it's done. And I was wondering if Richard, if there's anything in the amendments that the Borough Board has
Well,
to address that.
not enough with the aesthetics, but however, in terms of the height happens, besides the 5-foot rule, ground floor, is one thing. If you're doing the senior housing or the long-term care, you get the height, right? And if you're doing either the voluntary inclusionary or future mandatory inclusionary, you get the height. But the proposal reins in the height so that instead of some districts are getting 20 feet or more, the 20-foot districts would get 10 feet. So we're more like right-sizing the height, so we're not just giving away the extra height. So the city's getting the flexibility in terms of little courtyards, little deviations to the building wall, but in terms of the height, we're right-sizing it. We're not giving too liberal an envelope. You know we need a little bit more to fit the voluntary and the mandatory, fine, but not to give much more than they really need in terms of that.
Any other questions? Any other questions? Okay, we will now discuss the Borough Board's resolution seeking modification pertaining to duration of affordability for senior housing, retaining discretionary review of long-term care facilities in certain instances, more appropriate height and bulk for senior housing and long-term care facilities, appropriate building height and lot coverage, appropriate sizing of the transit zone and senior housing parking requirements. Some of these modifications will require subsequent actions by the Department of City Planning. The draft resolution was previously distributed to members of the Borough Board and highlights why the Borough Board seeks modification. If there are any questions, Richard will answer at this time, and also Mr. Ricala could answer as well.
My question is, my concern has to do with the senior facilities and putting senior facilities in communities that are very low density, which is very, very concerning to me, particularly because it affects Marine Park, affects the Mill Basin. So the recommendations have anything to do with removing that as a condition?
A whole lot. So basically, a couple things. One is, in terms of the senior facilities, the proposal already says, from city planning, if you're in a special zone, like you have some in Canarsie, a 4A district, it's a detached house district, a 4-1 district, you gotta do similar heights, similar floor area. You don't get the senior equivalent of a bonus in those districts anyhow. But we have a lot of blocks in Brooklyn, even though we've had these tools for 28 years, most of Brooklyn has the older rules from 1961. So the idea is if you're in a block and most of the block looks detached or semi-attached, you're going to be treated as if you were in that district. Therefore, in your block, you can't have that extra height, you can't have that extra floor area. So it's going to be the same bulk as the homes that are on the block.
So the concern is, so right now, for example, in Marine Park, 1 or 2 family houses. There's no empty space. Nobody's coming in to build senior facilities now.
Right.
But there's a possibility, a couple years down the road or longer, supposing there's a fire and half the block was taken out. That means someone could come in and build a senior facility because there's no similar height laws.
Well, usually the text gets set to the effective date of the resolution, so that fire would have to happen between now and the city council approving it. And once the council approve it, if there was something like that in the future, and there was a disaster like that, they're still stuck to what the character of the block was when the council would adopt this. So that would prevent that. The only alternative they would have, if they really wanted to build a bulkier senior facility, they would have to go to the Board of Standards and Appeals on a variance.
Okay, so are you making any recommendations about the senior facilities?
So the senior facilities basically would have to mimic the districts that you have, like the detached home districts, the semi-detached home districts, that your blocks that aren't in those particular districts, but they really warrant being in those districts, they would not have the advantage of the additional height for the senior buildings and the additional...
Right now, what's 30 feet?
Yeah, the height now is right with slope roofs.
Yeah.
So in the proposal, city planning's proposal is go up to 65 feet. And in certain cases, you would have about a 50% premium on floor area. So this proposal would say, well, in those blocks, since it looks like it should have been in one of those districts, you're dropping the floor area to the residential floor area.
Which would effectively mean it would not be economic.
It's like a de facto, exactly. No one's going to knock down a perfectly sound home to not really add more floor area.
Right.
And, you know, senior affordable housing, there's not exactly profit. And we have very few of the long-term care is the other type of use.
Yeah, well, I'm more concerned about, like a assisted living type.
Well, the assisted living doesn't fall under the senior housing. It falls under the long-term care facility.
Okay.
So again, this proposal, number one, would preclude long-term care facilities without going to the community board and possibly the council to call up on a special permit if the block mostly looked detached or semi-attached.
And that's what the borough president's proposal is?
The Borough Board. Borough
the
Board, yeah.
recommendation.
Yeah, so it would provide a lot more discretionary review than the proposal has today.
Okay.
The proposal today would limit only to R1 and R2 districts. We have maybe 60, 70 of those blocks in Brooklyn. This proposal would expand it significantly. And for the long-term care facilities, even where it would be as of right, it would have to match the residential heights and bulk unless...
So this would effectively nullify what city planning wants to do. Is that fair?
Unless you have a block that's significantly like 3-story row houses with front yard parking, yeah.
Any other questions? Okay. Richard, can you read the motion to disapprove?
Okay, again, this will be a motion to disapprove city planning's proposal for the quality and affordable, and within the resolution, the topics fall along the lines of the duration of affordability for senior housing, a couple of items regarding retaining discretionary review for long-term care facilities in certain districts, as just discussed, appropriate height and bulk for senior housing and long-term care facilities, again, as we just discussed, appropriate building height and lot coverage in many places throughout the borough, appropriate sizing of the transit zone, and senior housing parking requirements.
Do I have a second? Second, Community Board 15, amendments.
Yes, I'd like to request that you amend on page 10, where it says for CD 13. After that, I'm proposing it read the section south of Coney Island Creek.
Be removed from the transit zone.
Be removed from the transit zone.
Second.
Someone want to second that proposed amendment? Any other proposed amendments?
Can I have just a point of inquiry? That's what it is. So the other language on page 10 that refers to the parking requirements, is that necessarily limited to the transit zone appendix?
No, the next section, when you're outside the transit zone, the city is proposing a parking requirement in low-density R3, 4, 5 districts for 10%. This would lift the number from 10% to 15% in R5 and to 20% in R3 and 4. Today's standards in R3 and 4 are 35%. When you have a little bit of R4 in your board, and R5, the current requirement is 31.5. So 31.5, instead of dropping to 10, would drop to 15, and the 35 would drop to 20 instead of 10. This seems to reflect, when you look at existing Section 2 and 2 complexes, you see the lots are about half full right now.
But this applies to only to places, this language applies only to places outside of the transit zone.
Correct.
So that's what I meant.
Correct. The only language we have in here for elderly housing in general, if it's an existing elderly housing complex, rather than allowing them in the transit zone to totally eliminate parking, it would cut it in half. So if you look at Marion High in your district, you look in the parking lot, it's roughly about half full. So this would allow them to remove half their spaces so they can either use their remaining development rights or landscape it.
Thank you.
Okay. All members of the Borough Board are eligible to vote on this matter. Andrew, please call the roll.
CB1, CB2, CB3,
Yes.
CB4, CB5,
Yes.
CB6,
Yes.
CB7,
Yes.
CB8,
Yes.
CB9,
Yes.
CB10.
Yes, still stand by our committee recommendation.
CB11,
Yes, with, however, my understanding is that we have already submitted a text to you, so we want to add that to
sorry, say it again?
We have already sent you the amendment.
From your board. So this resolution was drafted in consultation based on the feedback we got from the boards. Your individual board recommendations are a separate standalone document that goes to city planning. We took what we could from there to make this resolution as comprehensive as possible. In some cases, it may not include every single thing that each individual board did, but it's fairly comprehensive. So we already have a copy of your resolutions, your recommendations, and so does city planning. CB12, CB13, CB14,
Yes.
CB15,
No.
CB16, CB17,
Yes.
CB18.
No.
Councilmember Barron,
Yes, with the same understanding as stated previously.
Councilmember Cornegy,
Abstain?
Councilmember Cumbo,
Yes.
Councilmember Deutsch, Councilmember Espinal, Councilmember Eugene, Councilmember Gentili, Councilmember Greenfield, Councilmember Lander, Councilmember Levin. Abstain. Councilmember Mizell,
Yes.
Councilmember Mealy, Councilmember Menchaca.
Yes, again, with the understanding that, especially with CB7 and the conversations that we're having, we're going to continue to have this conversation with the city council. Thank you.
Councilmember Reynoso,
Yes.
Councilmember Drager,
Yes.
Councilmember Williams.
Can I make some comments? So one, I forgot to mention with the MIH. I know we're doing ZQA, but on MIH, one of my biggest concerns is that there's not enough options, and there's not a good ability for there to be a mandatory amount of lower AMIs. And with the ZQA, part of my biggest issues was the long-term care facilities that seem to be addressed. The other was the lack of information of what AMIs are actually going to be in the additional FAR. And I don't know if there's a way to get to that, but I do have a concern that we can have that extra FAR across the city, and it actually all be 120% AMI depending on the project that we have. So I have some concerns about that I'd like to discuss a little bit further. But with that, I vote yes, and I thank the Borough President for his leadership on this issue, and I look forward to continuing and discussing additional ways to make the plan better.
Thank
Borough
you.
President Adams?
Yes.
Okay, vote passes 20 in favor, 2 opposed, 2 abstentions. Vote carries.
Thank you all. And again, I want to thank the entire Brooklyn delegation just for moving in unison to make sure that this complicated topic and this complicated issue is resolved together as one borough. So this will conclude our business related to the Quality and Affordable Housing Zoning Text Amendment. Tonight's final item on the agenda, I'm going to turn it over to Andrew to go through. I got 4 more stops. Brooklyn is a big borough.
That's right. Thank you, Borough President. So tonight's final agenda item is a resolution in support of Council Intro 214, legislation which would establish a right to counsel for tenants facing eviction in housing court. Last month, I recall 2 months ago, we received a presentation from the Right to Counsel Coalition on the legislation and on the importance of the legislation. Last month, we circulated a draft copy of the proposal, so you have a chance to review it, take it back to your boards, get some feedback. Copies of the proposed resolution have been produced again today when you came in. So I'd like to ask for a motion to introduce the proposed resolution that was distributed at the November meeting to all Borough Board members. Do we have a motion? Teresa, motion. Do we have a second for that motion? Demetrius? Okay, motion has been made and seconded. Do any members of the Borough Board have any comments or amendments to the proposed resolution? Great.
Is it possible for us to add language that would capture a right to counsel for small homeowners here? For homeowners who are occupying, that live in their homes and have 3 or less units in their building. Because what we're faced with are people who are saddled with mortgages that are intimately intertwined with the rents that they're due. So when they are in court, they're not receiving those funds, and now they are at risk of foreclosure.
That makes a lot of sense. Is there specific wording you want to have included? Because I think, just a couple of quick comments. First of all, the resolved clause says that the Borough Board supports the right to counsel for low-income tenants who face losing their homes in legal proceedings without a qualification on the number of units in that dwelling. And it also urges the council to adopt the specific legislation. I believe that Intro 214 only covers the units 3 or more, tenants who live in those units. So there is, to my knowledge, no pending legislation that we could call on to have enacted that's already been introduced. The resolution broadly supports the right to counsel for all low-income tenants. We can also come back and propose additional resolutions specifically to capture those people who are not covered by Intro 214, as well as potentially have the Borough President and his council colleagues introduce further legislation on that point. I'm happy to take a specific amendment to this text. I think this text covers that, but with the caveat that the legislation we're calling on the council to support that's already been introduced does not currently cover that. Does that make sense? Oh, that's your bill, right? 214, right to counsel?
Yeah, there's a few of us. Yeah.
Is that?
So can you explain that the limitation, is it only for folks who are considered low income, which would almost by definition exclude anyone who is probably a new homeowner and saddled with one of these mortgages?
Yeah, so just to offer a piece of conversation, that component of it is essentially silent, and what we can do is craft, and this is part of the conversation we're going to have through our public hearings on these bills that we just introduced. So that's something that has come up before, and I was going to mention that earlier, but I'm glad you gave me the floor. And that's something we want to redefine in the bill to make clear, but the intention is to have everybody access legal services. So that is the intention.
Thank you.
What would be helpful, though, is if we can add that to the resolution.
Oh, absolutely. I'm not saying we don't add it. Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you.
So Joanne, if you want to make a specific wording recommendation, I can come back to you in a few minutes if you want, take other questions. Any other questions or comments or proposed amendments to the submitted resolution on the floor? Okay, we'll just stand by for a few seconds to entertain the CB3's amendment.
Here's a question. Is this a funded proposal? Is there language in there for funding? And sort of, like, would it be legal aid? Who would be?
So this would also be part of our budget process as well. Yeah.
I believe when the Right to Counsel Coalition presented here, I don't have that in front of me, but I believe they said the estimates are either $40 million or $60 million to provide this to people, which dwarfs the cost of housing people who are evicted from their homes through homeless shelters and other resources, because they never had the right to counsel in the first place. Is what I think that number is what comes to mind. We can double check that. It's in the minutes from the September meeting, but that number sticks out. It's either 40 or 60 million.
Yeah. And there's multiple packages to that.
While we're waiting for CB3 to make a proposal, just want to remind everyone, everyone has a copy of the 2016 calendar in the packet. They should have gotten the documents. There's also more at the front table. It's also been emailed out. I sent that out about a month ago. It was a draft form. We finalized it now. So that'll be our calendar of meetings for 2016. If you have any questions, feel free to always reach out to me. Our next meeting is going to be Tuesday, January 5th, which is right after the new year, obviously. I won't keep the meeting that long. I'll get one chance to ease into the new year at our Borough Board agendas. But please make sure you have that. Does anyone have any old or new business they want to discuss while we're waiting? No one has anything? Okay, hey, I'm not complaining, I'll take it. So CB3 wants to include language in the resolution that would clarify that this right to counsel should also exist for individuals who might not be low income and renters, but they might be homeowners who are in mortgage situations that are untenable, and they're faced with legal action against them, and they don't have the resources to defend themselves or represent themselves in those situations. That's okay. What do you got?
Okay, in the resolved paragraph, it'll read, the Brooklyn Borough Board supports the right to counsel for low-income New Yorkers who face losing their homes in legal proceedings and urges the City Council and the Mayor to adopt Intro 214 or any other measures that would guarantee the right to counsel for low-income New Yorkers and homeowners who reside in the subject property which consists of 3 or less units and who face losing their homes in legal proceedings.
Say it one more time.
So after, in the last line, for low-income New Yorkers, then we will add, and homeowners who reside in the subject property, which consists of 3 or less units, comma, and who face losing their homes in legal proceedings. So then we pick up the text again.
And homeowners who reside in the subject property which consists of 3 or less units, who face losing their homes in legal proceedings. Any objections to that amendment from any members of the Borough Board? Is there a second to that amendment?
Second.
Okay, any other modifications? Okay, can we have a vote on the resolution as amended? We can take a quick yea or nay vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, there's no old business, there's no new business. This might be, just might be, the quickest meeting we have had. Oh, we're not done yet. I didn't adjourn yet. Quickest meeting we ever had in the past 19 or 20 months that I've been doing Borough Board meetings. So you're welcome all. It's a holiday miracle. Do we have a motion to adjourn? Do we have a second? Any objections? Anybody? Anybody? All right, thank you, everyone. Have a great holiday. Take care. Have a